Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, China matches new proposed U.S. tariffs, which cover $50 billion worth of goods. What would the rising trade tensions between China and the United States mean to the rest of the world? In tonight's one-on-one interview, a towering name in the Chinese music scene, Composer Ye Xiaogang, the chairman of the Chinese Musician Association, believes the universal appeal of music, so he says it belongs to all humanity. You are watching World Insight, and let's start with the escalating trade tensions between China and the United States. The Chinese Commerce Ministry said Wednesday that it has initiated a World Trade Organization complaint against Washington's 301 tariff investigation. That came after China earlier said it planned to impose additional tariffs of 25% on 106 U.S. products across 14 categories. The list includes soybeans, cars, and plane parts. The value of those goods were about $50 billion last year. Beijing's announcement is a direct response to Trump's move. On Tuesday, Trump administration published a list of about 1,300 Chinese exports it intends to hit with 25% tariffs. Those products are also worth about $50 billion a year, and they include software, patents, and various technologies.
China is fighting back, but only reluctantly.
We don't want a trade war. It could only hurt the interest of both China and the United States and the prospects of the world economy. At such a critical moment, it's our hope that China and the US will take a constructive approach with wisdom and mutual respect to properly cope with the problems.
The Vice Finance Minister's words came right after China announced punitive countermeasures on Wednesday, imposing 25% additional tariffs on major U.S. exports such as soybeans, cars, and aircraft. The act is in response to Washington's planned tariffs on up to $50 billion worth of Chinese imports.
The U.S. action is harmful to China's interests and economic safety. It threatens the recovery and stability of the global economy. The issuing of countermeasures is forced and measured.
The proposed U.S. list was unveiled Tuesday, bashing China's so-called coercive technology transfer practices. And the top target, Made in China 2025, an initiative opening up China's massive manufacturing sector to foreign investors. Analysts say as China becomes a technological preeminent economy, it is giving U.S. policymakers lots of pressure. Beijing said the date of implementation will depend on when Washington imposes the tariffs on Chinese products. But just as Vice Finance Minister Zhu said, one thing for sure is that a trade war will never result in a win-win situation.
Trade barriers and countermeasures. So what's next? Let's welcome our strong panel, 4 of them coming from different parts of the world. Here in Beijing, we have Zhang Jianping, once again, Director General of the Center for Regional Cooperation from the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation with the Ministry of Commerce. So today, you got a lot to say, I guess, Mr. Zhang, from the Ministry of Commerce perspective. Mr. Teng Jianchun, who is the Director of American Studies Department at the China Institute of International Studies. He has been an expert for decades about China-U.S. relations. Welcome, sir. Also joining us in Washington, D.C., Professor Christopher Chambers, a professor of journalism from Georgetown University. I'm sure many of his colleagues are busy covering this story around the world. And finally, last but not least, in Moscow, we have Mr. Mark Sleboda, who is an international relations and security analyst, certainly helping us to understand the impact of this news from different parts of the world. Let me begin with you, Mr. Zhang, very briefly. How do you see this tit for tat? Is this violating WTO rules, or actually this has already become a bilateral issue? Mr. Zhang.
Of course, I think that this time, this so-called 301 investigation from the U.S. side actually mainly based on their domestic law instead of WTO rules and regulations. Especially, even if the U.S. provided their investigation result to WTO, the problem is that they already have their punishment tariff list. So that means you actually didn't care about WTO. So right. I hope that the U.S. side can correct their doing.
Professor Chambers from the U.S., we understand the Chinese has also started with its own countermeasures against the U.S. actions of having a list of $50 billion of imports coming from China with heavier tariffs. The thing is, it's about soybean, it's about agricultural products, it's also about the plane parts, and the cars as well. What does that mean for the U.S. economy and the businesses?
Well, if you talk about something like soybeans, that is a central pillar, if you will, of American agricultural products that spill over into other products such as pork, which a lot of farmers that voted for Mr. Trump want more pigs imported to China, and soybeans are what a lot of these animals eat. Soybeans go into a lot of the things that are important in this economy. I think that what the president is trying to do by threatening here feeds into his usual style of negotiations, which is to forget the multilateral organizations like the WTO, right, which he doesn't trust, and a lot of people in his administration don't care for multilateral organizations, and try to basically bully China into giving him some kind of victory that he can take back to his base, his voting base, which is a very perilous voting base.
Okay.
And and that is that's basically the sum and substance of it here in Washington.
Mr. Sloboda, coming from Russia, I know you are also originally from the United States. Here's the thing. Commodity prices as a result of the so-called steel and aluminum tariffs, and now more coming about the soybeans, has already dragged the prices of these products going crazy, ups and downs over the days, in fact, over the past few weeks as well. So what would that mean for the world economy when the two biggest economies of the world are trying to figure out what exactly, who is abiding the laws and who is not?
Yeah, I think the rest of the world is looking at what's going on, shaking their head and wondering where the chips will fall and where the dust will settle, because we do live in a truly globalized neoliberal capitalist economy now, and the repercussions will be felt by every country, including Russia, which makes a good deal off of exports of commodities, energy and other raw commodities, particularly to China. And we've already seen dips in oil prices, and if this resulting trade war causes a reduction of U.S. consumption, Chinese demand, it's going to affect the Russian economy and knock on through economies around the world.
I see.
I think the key to understanding this is that Trump does not believe he could win a trade war or improve the budget, the trade deficit of $500 billion with China by this. This is his first step in his negotiating tactics, bluff and bluster. He wants a face-saving deal that he can bring back to his voters. His voters are working class voters. They helped him swing the election in Rust Belt states. And he promised them that he would improve their lot in life. He understands their pain. Those are the ones who have suffered from globalization.
I see.
He really can't help them. I mean, you can't let that genie or that efreet, whatever you want to call it, is out of the bottle. but he has to present some type of face-saving mechanism for them, because the real target of this is not really China. It's the 2018 midterm elections in the United States.
All right, we all understand that political theory behind all these going on here in the United States, but America's Twitter-in-chief did weigh in on what many fear to be the beginning of, quote, a trade war between the United States and China. In a recent tweet, here's what he said. Let's show it. You probably will be able to read it about this, whether it's a trade war or the so-called trade deficit from Mr. Trump's perspective. But certainly many people think differently from his theory. And talking about many people, Professor Chambers, I want to go to you because now the list comes out, $50 billion of tariff on goods for tariffs coming from the US, particularly those coming from China. But the thing is, it takes 60 days, that list, to solicit so-called public opinions in the United States. So this would mean people from different walks of life, in agro businesses, in cars, in planes, and in other businesses, they're going to come out and talk about this US list, whether they should punish China, quote, with tariffs. What do you expect in the next 60 days, and how do you think the dogfight inside Washington is likely to be done?
I don't know what's going to happen behind the scenes. I mean, there are already people in agribusiness, airplane parts, etc., who are talking to their friends in Congress, who are thus trying to lobby the president, because the president has gotten rid of a lot of the multilateralists in the administration and Commerce Department, State Department, etc. At this point, we just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the whispers are behind the scenes. Again, I don't think the president wants a trade war. I think the president wants a bilateral meeting and a deal before it escalates. The problem is, how is that going to happen when he's even making up figures like a $500 million trade deficit? That figure in itself is not accurate. So we just don't know what the situation is. This is a new territory, basically, that we're wading into, and new waters.
Well, we've been wading into a lot of new territories, haven't we, over the past 1 year? Mr. Zhang, here comes to you. The list comes from the Chinese side, whether it's soybean or cars or planes. Chinese side did not either give a date about when to implement this list. So what does that mean? Is China waiting for the U.S. side to the end result of a so-called list and see how Washington will eventually come to a consensus? Is that what China is thinking about, Mr. Zhang?
Actually, for this round of trade friction, U.S. side actually they raise this friction, and also from Chinese side, we hope that we can have bilateral dialogue, negotiations to solve this problem and to find solutions. And of course, if the U.S. side will implement their tariff list, maybe after 60 days, and then from Chinese side, we will take actions on that, or we will implement our list also.
I see.
But before that time point, I'm afraid that between China and the U.S., we need to take time and to promote our bilateral negotiations.
Okay, here's the thing. Mr. Tang, you've been attentive to listen to your other colleagues. Let's go to you. The Vice Minister of Commerce, Vice Minister Wang, and the Vice Minister of Finance, Vice Minister Zhu, both of them spoke today on Wednesday here in Beijing after the U.S. came up with the list to punish China with tariffs, and the Chinese also came up with another list. They both talk about if somebody wants to fight a trade war, China will fight until the end. But they also, both of them, talking about that if somebody wants to sit down for negotiation, China is willing to do that. And the door is always open. But the sword is not going to threaten China. So, Mr. Tang, what exactly is China having in mind? Is this in the middle of a negotiation strategy? Or is this a critical moment that the other side really have to think well of what it has in mind and what it wants?
First, I should say any trade friction or trade war we have suffered a lot for both sides. For example, in the past, there were at least 5 rounds of trade friction between China and the United States. And I think the leaders and the officials in the government, in the two governments, they should be very wise and they avoid the direct confrontation. And this time, I think 6 days might be long enough for the officials to think about it and find a way out of such a dilemma. But at this moment, I should say the Chinese government has been very well determined to, take countermeasures against any, violation of the international interest and China's national interest. So this is a well determined. This is a political decision. This is not only a warning from the government. I'm sure China has been well prepared also to deal with any provocative measures taken by the United States.
All right, we got some temperatures coming from China. But the thing is, what it's going to mean for the bilateral relation, we're going to come back to you, Mr. Tang, about that crucial point. But let me go to you, Professor Chambers in the US. So, what's going to be next? That has a lot to do with what this means to the international community. Because smaller and medium-sized economies around the world now, they really depend on the international rule or international rule-based mechanisms, such as WTO, such as other regional mechanisms, in order to have a fair discussion with any economic powers. United States, China, Russia, or some of the biggest ones in the world. So if this rule is violated by the United States, first of all, what would that mean for the overall system? And is there going to be any room for these economies around the world when it comes to their fair share of say in the negotiation and for the future? Professor Chambers, from your perspective, sir.
Well, here in Washington, we are looking at this with a lot of concern as to how this will affect emerging and medium-sized economies that depend on this multilateral regime, such as what the World Trade Organization, the WTO, provide. I mean, this has been a growth factor for these economies for decades now. We cannot retreat into this every nation being a fortress mentality that the president and many of his more strident advisors are pushing now. I mean, and this is the problem that the Chinese will have to think about if they go into bilateral negotiations to stave off a trade war. What kind of precedent is this going to set? Because the president wants to dismantle the multilateral regime, have a lot of bilateral relationships, horse trade, as we say in the United States, within these bilateral relationships, so he can get some kind of victory and then move on to the next nation and do that. That basically destroys any advantage that an emerging or medium-sized economy is going to have. And I don't think that he really cares about that. Again, he doesn't really care about some of the core issues he's talking about, like intellectual property or technology transfer. Those are basically excuses to start the bullying and the blustering. So I think that we're going to see some terrible things happening to emerging and medium-sized economies that aren't really going to be able to step in and say, provide China with soybeans or something like that, because they're going to be suffering as well from the fallout of this. I think everybody's very nervous right now and are looking to China to maybe provide some leadership to counter this kind of movement.
Everybody is nervous. We heard from prime ministers, presidents from many different countries just over the past 2 days or so. Mr. Zhang, here's the thing. Okay, China embraced the international system. Chinese president at the World Economic Forum and later on very different occasions embraced the existing system, want to complement with new reforms and also improvement. That's one side. But on the other side, when somebody else attacks China first, China has to respond. Well, not waiting vain. That is just a matter of human interest, right?
Yes.
So here's the thing. How can China handle this dilemma? On the one hand, together with others, protect the international mechanism. On the other hand, make sure that nobody's going to take advantage of this and make China the victim of it. Mr. Zhang.
Firstly, I think that China will confirmly support multilateral international trade regime as well as system, as well as globalization. Meanwhile, we are also promoting, regional regime in order to promote both trade and investment liberalization and facilitation. Also, of course, for China itself, we need to promote our new round of reform and opening up in order to promote both our own development as well as other countries' development. The problem is that for the US side, you have no right to enforce China to do something because that's China's own thing.
Right.
And we will have our steps and our agenda. Another thing is that I'm afraid that from the US side, you cannot blame China's target and objective of our new strategic industries development. For China, we have our ambitious Made in China 2025. That's China's own thing. And if you think that there is a trade deficit issues, you're just focusing on trade dispute issues instead of blame other countries' industrial development plan.
Right, and China is doing this structural reform. By the way, that is about reducing the tariffs, reducing rather the trade plus and the trade surplus with the United States, because it was garment, it was the shoes that was actually contributing to the surplus. Having said that, though, let me also go to you, Mr. Teng, about that. China, United States, the biggest economies in the world, the two has to work together. It's just as simple as that. If the two fight against one another, what would be the rest of the world? It's just a simple matter. So here's the thing, Mr. Teng, you are an expert on China-U.S. relations for a long time. Is there anything, any tool that we can grab right now so the two countries are really going to come to the negotiation table, or the two countries can really set a good example for all the others around the world? Mr. Teng.
First, I should say the trade deficit between China and the United States is not a result by the Chinese capability. It's actually division of labor.
Explain, please.
Yeah, it's just to give some explain. Actually, both countries are trade or market-oriented economy. And you cannot force any businessman to transfer your high tech to another company. This is actually a basic knowledge for any country, for anybody. So I don't think China had forced businessmen doing their business in China transfer their technology to Chinese company. This is a basic knowledge for any side. So I think we should think about the result. Actually, there are a lot of complementarities between the two economies in the world.
Yeah,
and
but where is the tool? Okay, a lot of reasoning over there, we understand. But Mr. Teng, where is the tool that would bring these two countries back to the important issues for the world, but not just go on with this tit for tat?
First, I should say we should have a new mentality towards each other, not the zero-sum game.
Can the mentality be cultivated within 60 days?
We should have a consensus at the first stage, and each side should be quite familiar with the result of such a trade friction or trade war.
Mr. Sloboda, very briefly from you to, even though you're standing on the sideline looking at this, but this is a crucial issue, not just between two countries, but rather between what we have now and what we should have for the future, Mr. Sloboda.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of damage, a lot of flak damage that could occur to our global institutions as a result of this. Once again, the U.S. is showing its brazen contempt for international law, be that the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, or the bilateral negotiations and treaties it signs with other countries. And there certainly could be some repercussions from this. The U.S. could also face damage in its relations with other countries who look at what the U.S. is doing here and really doubt U.S. leadership. China could come out of this ahead in the perception game. And China needs to understand first and foremost that they are guest actors in a political theater that Trump is arranging, for a domestic audience. This is all about domestic politics. In order to come out ahead, China has to understand that and decide whether to give in and what to give in for a face-saving measure or to fight back. And I think they fully understand that, because if you take a close look at the products that China has put tariffs on in retaliation, a lot of those are produced in red states, sensitive states that Trump and the Republican Party needs to win. Agricultural products, whiskey, cigars, right? These indicate that China understands that, and they can hit back politically at Trump in the United States. I think they know how to play his game.
All right, before we go, we only have one sentence from every one of you. The next 60 days, what shall we watch? Very briefly, one sentence from one person. Mr. Zhang.
Yeah.
One sentence if you can, sir.
I hope the U.S. could be back on, WTO framework.
All right.
Yeah. Also, we need to promote our bilateral negotiations.
Mr. Tang.
Please be confident in the capabilities of our officials, from both countries. They should have way out of dilemma.
We hope so.
In these days.
All right, Professor Chambers, one sentence.
Please, I hope the parties let the WTO take a look at this first before there are bilateral meetings.
All right, and also Mr. Sloboda, finally, one sentence.
In the next 60 days, there's only one show in town to watch, and that's Trump's Twitter feed to see where this is going.
Even though I'm not a fan of it, probably all of us will watch that, but we hope policies are being made on a sound basis, not on a shouting basis. For now, I want to thank the four of you gentlemen for being with us. Christopher Chambers, Mark Sloboda, and Zhang Jianping, Teng Jianchun. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay with us here on World Insight on CGTN. Still to come on our program, he is well known as rather prolific composer of Chinese contemporary classical music. Ye Xiaogang believes all of the humanity has a claim to the universal language of music, something he explains at length in the interview. A very good piece right after this break.
In this episode of Travelogue, we continue along the Pearl River and share with you Xunwu. We discover rock temples and a rock trade while on a grueling journey in search of something very small but very special. Join us to find out what it is, plus more.
The Boao Forum brings together the world's top visionaries. Ideas flow, and I will be there with the delegates, helping you sort out the opinions and getting the most out of the forum.
I will be on hand to interview the top movers and shakers. Join me to hear their voices, to get inspired, and to learn how future policies are being shaped at Boao.
And I will provide dialogue with the thinkers and policymakers. Careful analysis at one of the world's major gatherings. Join us to examine the world's future at the Boao Forum for Asia.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
We have come a long way. Changes happen, and fast, from all corners, different lives, voices, and visions. Encouraged to think, enlightened to change. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. People's tastes in music may vary from pop to classical, jazz, and rock, but one thing common to all of them is the universal appeal of music, the ability to captivate the human ear. In China, one composer towers above many others as the most prolific and most well-known composer of contemporary classical music. Ye Xiaogang is the chairman of the Chinese Musicians Association. He believes instead of treating music as personal property, it should belong to all of humanity. Born in Shanghai in 1955, Ye has become one of the biggest names of China's contemporary classical music scene. He was a member of the class 1978 of Central Conservatory of Music, which produced a number of the most notable composers in contemporary China. Recently, we caught up with him, and here is that conversation. I mean, at the end of the day, we are so-called debating in China, bringing Western contemporary music and make it Chinese. Do you agree with that concept?
No, it's not bring the Western contemporary music to China. It's the property of the humanity, all kinds of music. So we should supposed to have this, because before it's forbidden, it's unusual, you know, because of certain very special circumstances about China historic moments. But all the results of the art, including contemporary music, is the property of all human. So we're supposed to have this, not bring them there. When the China is open, everything's like we can see at all. So, of course, we will influence Chinese new music, of course, certain period. I think now is the date that we are the Chinese musicians, we take seriously looking at the history of the music. I mean, Western classical music, from classical period to until now. We take this, absorb those, see this kind of music realistically. Which one is we can use? We can, as a mirror, see ourselves. So I think nowadays, the Chinese new music, the technique problem already solved. We see everything now. We just choosing whatever we would like to.
Suit the best.
Yeah, so choose the best, fit our culture.
You also have to know the best coming from all over the world. And you also have to rally all the people so that they can concentrate their efforts on it.
So it's a lifetime task, the working with this. It's a lifetime.
And you're trying
experiment never, it's endless. And all the combination, all combine everything, all
experiment.
Yeah, experiment is a lifetime. So it's a really hard job.
You tried it yourself too, many times.
Yeah, I'm through nowadays. I'm still go to the very far away in China, you know, those very rural area, and see the minority music, traditional, primitive music, traditional music. No matter it's traditional drama music, traditional folk music, folk songs. I still go through all the country. I still go all the parts of that.
Are you still getting excited when you hear something that's really new?
Of course, yeah.
When was the last time?
Last time, just let me see, couple of days ago.
Where did you go?
I'm going to Qinhuangdao, because it's a harbor. He is the point of between. Go out is northeast. When now you go out, it's northeast, Dongbei. You go inside of Guannei. This is really part of a very important harbor, the spot of culture. I'll see so many things different. I go to the, even very cold, I go to the sea. Take a boat, a huge boat, I go to sea and go to the countryside, see what people celebrating, how do they celebrate their spring festival. It's different. All people different.
You're still very excited about this.
Of course, I'm very happy about this. You know, it's very reflecting your mind, reflecting, you know, refresh on my mind, and what kind of history in China is all different. You know, during last century, 20s, those areas is already developed so well, but the primitive condition, life condition, culture, art, what people singing, what people song, what people dancing, is still there. It's very, very interesting.
You love the liveliness of life, it seems.
Yes, see, all people are different. You see the culture, for instance, the culture song, okay, like a folk song. Before, during the 70s, last century, 70s, 80s, the folk song is very hard, painful life. Now, almost the same condition, almost the same melody, but when the people sing these songs differently. They are very, I'm not saying happy, but they are very positive life. They are much easier. Lovers get very easier through the iPhone. They can see each other, no difficulties. They want.
There's no folk songs anymore. Then
there's still folk song, but it's more the character is changed. The melody is the same. The song of the character is changed.
I mean, moving forward, we are experiencing some of the most exciting time in history, in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
But it seems that our arts and culture, some say, the quality of it really has not caught up to the place that we aspire to be.
You will see. For instance, like during the war, Second World War, when China invaded by the Japanese, very famous song, Songhua Jiangshan, on the Songhua River. It's after 4 years, the song's coming, because people already suffering for 4 years. The Yellow River Cantata, Huanghe Dahechang, is after 8 years. So it's really take time, especially in music. Yeah. You know, those kind of sense become all your country, all your nation, all the people, they have this kind of sense. Then one day it's going to one artist, he can make a historical piece.
Do you think people feel they have the space to create?
I think we do. It depends how the people, how the artist themselves make themselves keep progress, move forward. Yeah, not only self-discipline, but discipline is discipline, but you have to motivate really yourself and keep. Of course, we love to keep update for the society, for your art, piece of art, of course, but you have to stay in your own way. Which way is your best? You have to stay there strongly, powerfully, and make your own piece. One day it should be work.
You try to portray Dunhuang.
Yeah.
You try to portray some of the best mountains and rivers in China and make them into symphonic music. You did a lot of experiments. What do you make of this mixture?
It's kind of things like, it's hard to explain, hard to describe.
Do you care?
I don't care, yeah. Me is important. I mean the music, not myself.
Of course.
Yeah, music is important. I try this way, I try the other way. Try to combination all the stuff, or try to separate everything, single, one by one moment. You know, I try all the way. This is the task of the artist. You have to experiment yourself. You'll never satisfy yourself, I think. I'm the kind of person, never satisfied.
How do you think composers could come out of their comfort zone to do some challenging work, to do a work that makes sense, that make an impact?
Yeah, this is we should do this every day, right? We should do this for your lifetime. Yeah, you know what I mean? How? It depends how genius you are, yeah. How you think, how many responsibility you bear on, so you carry on. Sometimes it happens, could happen. It's not difficult if you are real serious artists. It happens.
It was the great time, isn't it?
Yeah.
1970s, you went into the Central Conservatory of Music.
In 1977, yeah.
So many of you, of the one class, eventually become the biggest name in Chinese contemporary music. It's a miracle, some say.
Yeah, in that sense, you are right. But to the society, this class is still too small. You cannot make history progress dramatically or drastically. But this is just a fact, just because of people talk too much about this class.
Not really, because you do have a lot of great people. You've got Tan Dun, Guo Wenjing, Liu Suola, you and
Xiaosong,
yes. Almost everyone that people got familiar with over the past few decades from that class. Why? Can we have one of those classes every year coming up?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
Yeah, because it's during the Cultural Revolution, the school closed for 10 years. So those kind of us, okay, we are in the society everywhere, every day battle for our lives. But to survive. But one day the school's open, you get a chance to get in. So that's why all of a sudden, all the people, about 30 composers getting together in one class. That's why it happened. Afterwards,
the best, the most talented.
Yeah, but
afterwards, waiting in a way.
Yeah. But afterwards, you know, the schools are regularly open, so it's not that much people. That's the fact. That's supposed to be. You know, if every day, if every year, we create 30 composers, the society is going to be crazy.
The society is going to be tested as a result.
Yes.
Yeah. But when your students ask you, I mean, you used to serve as president of Central Conservatory of Music.
Yes.
When they ask you, can we be like you? What did you say to them?
I say, of course,
I would like to say,
of course, you have to work hard. This is the first thing. Secondly, I would like to say, you know, historical moment, it take chance. It's not it's not that way, you know, like every day you can produce something, like you can follow the pattern, you follow the something model, like every day you produce something. You know, artists is different, musician is different, like writers, like painters, like artists, like fine arts creators. You know, it's not annually produced. It's by time, by chance, by historical moment. Boom, something happened.
So you don't think so-called the comments coming from the current society important to you?
Oh,
not as much as what it would mean in history when it comes to your work.
The current society's comments very important to the artist. I would like to say that this is right, of course. They give you a chance. If those really good comments give you a chance, give you to meet people, have more exposure, and give you more time, and give you more chance to compose your piece, to create your piece, whatever the art form is. Of course, this is important. But don't take, for us, we don't have to take too much attention upon that. You have to work very hard anyway. So you really make yourself really high standard. You have to self-improvement every day. This is really hard.
And self-discipline.
Yeah, self-discipline.
Ye Xiaogang, chairman of the Chinese Musicians Association, and certainly one of the biggest names when it comes to contemporary classical music in China, talking about arts and culture in today's China, what is going to be its chance to prosper for the future. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.